You're very welcome along to episode 1 of Off the Ball's Classic Game Club. Every week we're going to pick out a memorable sporting event from the past. This week, the not-so-distant past, because we're talking about Kerry against Dublin in 2013. Delighted to say that Nathan Murphy is with us in studio. You're very welcome.
Great to be here.
And Stephen Doyle, how are you?
Thanks, Owen. I'm all good.
So the idea behind this every week is that we're going to go look at a game, watch it back, mostly available on YouTube or Daily Motion or whatever. So you at home, you're more than welcome to join in. Both parts, part 1 and part 2 of Dublin against Kerry in 2013 is available on YouTube. Feel free to pause this, open it up in another tab and come back to us, because that is exactly what we've done over the last couple of days. But you were there, Nathan. You were working at the game.
I was.
Did it feel different watching it back?
Yeah, because I had to go looking to see was I actually working at the game. I had a feeling I was. I would have covered pretty much all the football games of that era. But the second you watch it back and about 5 minutes in, you're like, yeah, Gooch, genius. It was... I was probably watching it in the back of my mind. All I'm thinking about is Mayo already in the final.
That's true. James Horan does get a couple of mentions and it pans to him at the end of the game as well. Sitting pretty there in the final. There's always kind of a smug sense of the team that got to the final the week beforehand. Yeah,
I think as well, whenever you have a semi-final, it's a sellout. It just feels a bit different.
Feels like a final.
Like there's that proper sense as they're doing the walk around Croke Park beforehand in the parade of something bloody special is about to happen here.
Where were you watching it?
I was working as well. First was my first final. I was actually working...
Semi-final?
Sorry, semi-final, I beg your pardon. But
we're probably sitting beside each other.
Yeah, it's a good chance. It's funny because when I started out, and I remember the very first Dublin match I covered was like... It was back in 2009, and it was like a league game between Dublin and Donegal up in Ballyshannon. And I had to get like about 3 buses up to Ballyshannon from Dublin, and it was a horrible, windy, wet day and all. I just remember sitting there thinking that Dublin and Kerry semi-final and thinking, wow, I've made it now, you know, this is... it's been worth all the effort.
Living the dream.
All those treks around the country, you know. But like you guys said, like the fact that it was a sellout and... whatever anybody says, and I know people say sometimes it's like Manchester United against Liverpool. Sometimes these Dublin Kerry games can be a little bit overplayed, but well, we've been served up a few classics by those two counties, and this was one of the best. I wasn't working at the game. I was a true fan. I was watching it front row on public Gaelic tent at Electric Picnic, so I wasn't actually at the game. My friends found me somewhere around the main stage a couple of hours later, bawling. No, I wasn't crying. Maybe I was. I don't know.
Did you cry?
Maybe a little.
Have you shed a tear for Kerry?
Yes, I have.
On a regular basis?
Not on a regular basis, but
well,
if you've been on it all day at Electric Picnic and then you watch a Kerry lose in Dublin, one of the best games of all time, 3 days. That is how the tears start to happen. So this is how it's going to work on the Classic Game Club. We're going to go through a series of awards, basically. We're going to go through the moment of the match for all of us, our secret man of the match, and then reveal who the actual man of the match was. Talk about some of the trends that we discovered at the time that now look pretty unusual. Some of the things that are most jarring now when we look back on it as well. We're going to get a bit of the reaction from the time. A lot of it is fairly telling. We're going to talk about some of the sliding doors moments that occurred in the game, and then finally give our take on whether or not the game is overrated or underrated. Before all that though, we're going to set the context for the game, and there's no better group of men to give us that than the 3 amigos in the Sunday Game studio. Here is Pat Spillane and Colm O'Rourke before Kerry against Dublin in 2013.
I was down in Killarney at the Dublin-Kerry League match, working on it with you a couple of months back, and that day you described Kerry football as being in crisis. Now this crisis has ended up in an All-Ireland semi-final.
You've been doing your research, Michael, I noticed this. I think everyone's out to get me today, yes? Dublin beat Kerry that day, 1 goal and 11 points to 4 points. Kerry got 1 score from playing the entire 60 minutes. What's the difference? Well, the difference is really in the forwards. Out of today's starting 6 forwards, only James O'Donoghue who played that day. The big guns are now back, the Declans, the Darrens, the Paul Galavans, the Gooches. They've trained very hard. The talent, the problem we saw that day in Kerry was that they were trying a lot of new footballers, and unfortunately they're not up to senior standard. They weren't ready for it. They tried them in the first 2 or 3 games in the league. They lost those games.
Over the last 40 years, Kerry have just murdered Dublin, or the last 30 years in general, apart from, say, 2011 and a few other games. But Kerry have dominated Dublin through Pat's time and through up to the modern era. So what has changed now, of course, is Dublin have a very fresh young team. Since 2011, they have players like young Mannion and Kilkenny and Jack McCaffrey, who certainly have added something really outstanding to their attacking play. So Dublin have improved, and Pat was making the point that they brought the old guns back. I suppose that's the problem in Kerry. There just doesn't seem to be bodies to replace, and it happens with all great teams. Why would you do away with Tomás O'Shea and Mark O'Shea and Gooch and Declan O'Sullivan, Paul Galvin? Who's going to replace them? And the answer simply at the moment is nobody.
That was actually a pretty good line and a fairly good take, I think it's fair to say, from Colin Moore before the game, because that becomes so important throughout the 70, 80 minutes that we see. The young Dubs that have turned out to be possibly their best generation of players ever against Kerry's, one of Kerry's best generations of players ever, but they're all really old. Like, one of the things that kind of gets lost in this pre-game was just the revenge for 2011 that was on the table. It doesn't really get mentioned much in the match commentary, but it is Jim Gavin's first year against Eamon Fitzmaurice's in his first year. So you've got a situation here where it kind of feels that the slate is clean from 2011. And then, kind of separate to the whole game in the context of it, is that it's the summer of Sean Kavanagh. It's the summer of his pull down on Conor McManus, and it's something that we're going to discuss quite a bit here because it feels like a different sport at times, and the deliberation that people took in terms of pulling people down whenever they were within eyeshot of goal.
There was one other bit of context, I think, to this in terms of the historical significance. This game, within the previous year, both Paudie O'Shea and Kevin Heffernan had died, which I remember being very much a part of the build-up that, as always, when Dublin played Kerry, there was a huge amount of focus on what happened during the 70s and the 80s, and I think that just added to it as well, that the two legends, the two greatest figures perhaps of that era, had passed on in the previous 12 months. Yeah,
that's a good point, actually. I completely forgotten about that it had kind of taken on a fully historical context. But like, this is better than anything of their era, isn't it? Is this like, I know it's not fair to compare two different eras, but even in the intervening years since then, there was almost a sense of managers being naive. Even Jim Gavin showed elements of naivety to it, and all of a sudden the ball is thrown in and it just explodes into madness immediately. And I think that's part of it. Two managers that are in their first year, it's quite evident.
Well, it probably showed that first, definitely 20 minutes, how Dublin had developed from the previous 4 years from the start of the Earwigs game, where Kerry got the fast start in 2009, killed Dublin, and Dublin had no bottle, had no backbone to come back into the game at all. They just let Kerry run riot. Where this time, even though Kerry kept scoring goal after goal after goal in 2013, like, Dublin stuck with them. They got the next point every single time. They just kept going. That they never looked like a team who were beaten. Even when Kerry were totally dominant, playing by far the better football, it was very much, it felt like a clash of two styles in a way, in that you just had...
Do you think so?
I just thought, because, particularly in that first half, where you had the artistry of Gooch, just running the show and everyone buzzing off him, and like Donnacha Walsh was brilliant at times in that game as well, whereas Dublin just seemed like a machine of, we're just going to put our heads down and stay in this game no matter how we do it.
At the same time, though, there is the sort of erratic nature to that Dublin team, which I really like. I think it's the...
Oh, it was far better.
it's the...
When you felt like it a chance, it was a wonderful time.
And they would always give you a chance, it seemed. And like, this is the environment that I think we see the best version of Diarmuid Connolly, like swinging balls over left, right and centre. It's brilliant stuff. Just some of the matchups here, like you mentioned Donnacha Walsh. Donnacha Walsh against Jack McCaffrey was something that flies under the radar here.
First 40 seconds of the game, ball breaks out on the left-hand side. McCaffrey head down, Donnacha Walsh head down, full speed for about 60 metres. It's just brilliant.
Yeah.
And the weirdest thing, and actually one of the things that I found strange watching it is, like, it's only 6.5 years ago. In my head, for some reason, Jack McCaffrey shouldn't be on a pitch with Tomás O'Shea.
It is mad, isn't it?
Just Tomás O'Shea. I was like, this was Tomás last season.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like they're two different generations, and like, they are in a way in that, like, Tomás is the best halfback of the first 10 years, and Jack McCaffrey's probably the best halfback of the second 10 years. But there they are, sort of speeding by each other.
If I can just go back a little bit further as well, before getting into the technicalities of the game, I think it was important to note as well the fact that obviously Pat Gilroy stepped down the year before. Jim Gavin comes in. Now, we all know Jim Gavin now, he's, free man of Dublin, he's won all these titles 5 in a row with Dublin, but coming in at that stage, everybody thought, right, well, this man can do it under 21 level. He's won 2 under 21 All-Irelands, but it's different being a senior manager. But I do think, you have to kind of give a nod to the succession plan that Dublin had there in place. I was looking at Jim Gavin's 2 under 21 teams going into, from 2010, 2012. 2010 team, you had Rory O'Carroll, Johnny Cooper, James McCarthy, Dean Rock. The 2012 team, you had Kevin O'Brien, who obviously got hooked very early in that game. I will touch on that, though, in more detail. Jack McCaffrey, Davy Byrne, Ciarán Kilkenny and Paul Mannion. So, the succession plan there. I don't know about Eamon Fitzmaurice when he came in there and what kind of players he'd worked with before he'd come in and taken over the senior setup. But what Dublin had there in place was really excellent when you look back at it now. You look back as well at that that year 2013, Ballymun-Kickham's got to the club final, and you had the likes of James McCarthy, Dean Rock, Philly McMahon in that team. And I remember being at that final. They threw away that final against St. Bridget's. They took they'd scored 2 goals and a point within the first 15 minutes, and Ballymun should have won out. They should have closed out that club final. But I think the experience that those players gain from games like that, and then if you move it on to the 2013 league final, when Dublin beat Tyrone, and I actually I noted one of the report, Martin Bretney's report in the Irish Independent that year, that 2013 final. 2 points by Dean Rock, who replaced Bernard Brogan in the 58th minute, one by Jack McCaffrey in the final 4 minutes, steered Dublin to victory after they trailed 6 times in the second half. And I think that was gave us an indication of what was to come, not just in 2013, but throughout Jim Gavin's reign. Dublin teams finishing strongly in the last 10 minutes. Whereas we would have seen, and I know myself, the heartbreak of being a Dublin fan, we would have caved in matches like that for the 2 or 3 decades previous.
Well, even obviously 2009, but even the previous year in 2012, Gilroy's last game, that sort of 10 minute before half time, 10 minute after half time spell that Mayo had, where they absolutely blitzed them. Well, I think they led by 10 points on 50 minutes, having just point after point where Dublin just couldn't get out of their own half, just kept giving it away so simple, whereas that never happened here. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting that you mentioned the Ballymun lads as well. It's definitely something that I picked up on, the fact that Philly and Dean Rock come off the bench and make a huge difference in this particular semi-final. We do want to get into some of the moments of the match here. We'll start with you, Nathan. What is the defining moment of the 2013
What did I say?
semi-final? You said... I think you said Declan O'Sullivan's miss. Declan O'Sullivan's miss, yes. His wide on 68 off the left, which you would have off his left foot, you would have expected him to kick. And it was hanging, and it was hanging, and it was hanging, and it felt at that moment like Kerry are just about to go back in front. So I think it's 68 and a half minutes. You're thinking, it is. At this stage, every point is going to be absolutely pivotal. And you fancy him every day of the week because he'd been having a fine game. Puts it, just drifts and ever so slightly to the right and wide, and Dublin goes straight up the other end of the pitch, and Kevin McMahon scores a goal. That's it. It is Declan O'Sullivan's. That's the moment. 100%. If that goes over, it's amazing how that one moment can actually turn it from what would have been a 2-point lead into a 7-point deficit at come the end of the game. Now, in the middle of that,
disagreeing here with you lads.
Okay, you go ahead first before I make the case for this again.
The 17th minute of the game, I was watching it back last night. Dublin were getting murdered in the first. The first thing I noticed was the first couple of kick passes from Kerry, Colm Cooper, and who was he passed to O'Donoghue, and Anthony Marr kick passing to Crowley, and they were within the first 90 seconds. I was like, wow, this Kerry team are on their game here today. Absolutely unbelievable. But anyway, progressing from there, Dublin, they looked nervy at the start. Paul Flynn gave the ball away. There was a couple of little silly mistakes within the Dublin performance. But Dublin were getting swamped at the back. Kerry were just all over them. Colm Cooper, as we've mentioned already, he was like a magician in that first half. But I thought Ger Brennan was having an awful game. And I hate saying this because I know Ger very well, and he's a lovely fan, but he was having a terrible game. And in fact, I thought that axis of O'Carroll and Ger Brennan in the centre of the Dublin defence were absolutely getting destroyed. And in the 17th minute, Jim Gavin made a substitution. It was a very brave thing for a manager in his first year to do, to make a substitution so early. And it was Kevin O'Brien being taken off, Philly McMahon coming on. And then what he did was then he put Johnny Cooper onto James O'Donoghue, and he put Philly McMahon onto Darren O'Sullivan, and that changed the game. Now, it didn't have such an immediate impact in that first half where, where it was going to. I thought with that change, the results from that change were more evident in the second half, and it was really Dublin's defensive performance in that second half, I think, that won. Fair enough, they got the scores up the field and all that, but it was the defensive performance from then on that I thought changed the game. We started to see this sort of stuff, which was probably more of a feature of the 15 final, the crowding around the Kerry players so effectively, and when Donaghy went into the fray, it just became a free-for-all for the Dublin defenders. They loved that. It was fish in a barrel, really. So I'm on Nathan's side here on this one. I think the Declan O'Sullivan wide, it's
been spoken about so much in the intervening years. It's still something that you just wonder if it had gone to the left a little bit more, what might have happened. Dublin fans would argue, well, there was a 7-point deficit at the end and their fitness was clearly superior, so it might not have mattered. But I want to mention one other moment here, and it is after about 10 minutes of the second half, I want to say, when Colm Cooper is going through in goal, pokes the ball along the grass, past a pack of Dublin footballers until Johnny Cooper's leg comes flailing out. Johnny Cooper on a yellow card and stops Gooch in his path through on goal. And somehow Johnny Cooper escapes a second yellow card. Now, he's somebody who knows all about a yellow card in an All-Ireland final. And we saw the impact that made in 2019. In 2013, I think that's the changing of the game. I don't think Dublin make the All-Ireland final if Johnny Cooper gets sent off, which he should have done. And it is astonishing that the referee managed to miss it on that occasion.
Should he have got the first one? Because Dublin had 5 yellow cards within the first 45 minutes. And I thought some of the yellow cards were ridiculous. Like, I thought the reffing of the game was pretty poor. Now, it wasn't a dirty match. Like, when you look through that game, it wasn't
tough at the very least.
Like, it was a tough match, and it was 100 miles an hour. So if you were a split second off, it looked probably, the challenge looked worse than it was because.
And then Philly comes over and runs on top of Gooch as well. That was an accident, in fairness.
But no, I don't know.
Definitely.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, because Nathan I just wrote down when you were talking about the bottom and backbone that Dublin were lacking. I thought that was the game where Philly McMahon and Johnny Cooper really laid down a marker for what was going to come for the next few years. We are tough bastards and nobody's going to get past us. You know, that was, and to be fair, McMahon and Cooper were the two, like Keane O'Sullivan was the general of that Dublin back six for the years to come, but they were the two hard men that were never going to give up.
Well, that was one of my main takeaways from watching the game that I had down was every time there's a break in play, every time there's a challenge off, Johnny Cooper's the first man into the screen.
Yeah.
Every little scrap, he's there.
Well, that's actually an interesting point, because Joe makes a very valid point here, is that when you're rewatching the game, you're only getting the television view. You're not seeing what's happening off the ball, which so many of the yellow cards are. So perhaps there's a bit of an inaccuracy in that. Before we wrap up moments of the match, I just think we need to go back to 6 minutes, 30 seconds, James O'Donoghue's goal, and that daisy cutter pass from Gooch into Donegal Walsh, hand pass over his shoulder, bang, from O'Donoghue. It was as good as they've played football at any point over the last 10 years, and you knew straight away, 7 minutes into the game, you're like, right, we're on here. This is going to be possibly an all-time great game, which it ended up being. We want to move on. Man of the match, which is, we're going to do this in sort of our own way. We're going to have our own little ballot here and then reveal who actually got the Sunday game man of the match, because of course they decide everything.
I am interested to see who got the Sunday game man of the match.
Who have you gone for?
Who did I go for? Yet again I'm going, who did I go for? I'm going to say I went for Johnny Cooper. Did I go for Johnny Cooper? I should have gone for Johnny Cooper. I was Gooch in the first half was just unplayable.
Yeah.
And Connolly in the second half was as good as it gets. But I do think what Stephen touched on there, that Johnny Cooper and the little bit of nastiness that they brought into the game more and more as it wore on was key to Dublin getting to grips with that Kerry forward line. That after that initial, it's hard to give man of the match to a defender who was part of the defence that concedes 3 goals in the first 20 minutes. But once they got things sorted out, and I think Cooper was to the fore, like Philly wasn't far off. I thought Paul Mannion at times was brilliant.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, himself and Brogan picking up bits and pieces everywhere. Like, Brogan didn't have his best day, but he was still the most effective point taker for Dublin.
He could have been better because there was a couple of times he was there free for goal chances and he was ignored by his teammates. I think Michael Darragh Macaulay and possibly Keane O'Sullivan, I think, two midfielders breaking forward him. But
for me, it's Philly McMahon. Philly McMahon, that substitution, I agree, was a massive stroke from Jim Gavin, and I think he actually goes on O'Donoghue for a lot of the game as well in the second half, which kind of changed things as well, because I know he goes on Darren at the start.
O'Donoghue was ripping Kevin O'Brien to shreds.
He was.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to Kevin O'Brien?
Because
when I saw the team name, the first thing you're looking through the two teams like Kevin O'Brien.
It's incredible, isn't it? He
didn't play in the final.
I had to check his age. I was kind of thinking, God, Kevin must be like, is he just too old now to be? He's 28.
Wow.
Yeah, there was. He obviously, I think he was involved with the team at the start of the next year, and then it became more of a back seat, and then Jim
a couple
went
of
for
himself,
other players.
Kevin Nolan just kind of were phased out of the panel over the next couple of years, and it's a shame. I think Kevin did have a bad shoulder injury at one point as well. I'm just wondering if he ever I look, as somebody who covers Dublin GA, probably should know, but something I'm going to check out, I think, after this.
Because he made an unbelievable lung-bursting run at the very start, and you're like, how did I forget Kevin O'Brien playing in this game? But then eventually James O'Donnell gets into the game and he gets taken off.
Yeah.
So, and there was a bit in the 3 or 4 minutes before he was taken off where he was treading water, where O'Donoghue just went past him, and it looked like, people have those days, maybe you wake up in the morning and something isn't quite right, but he definitely looked like it was one of those days because he was nowhere near the pace of the game defensively. And Jim Gavin, as you say, like, it is brave enough, your first year in charge, to make that substitution so early.
So you've gone for Johnny Cooper, I've gone for Philly McMahon. Who have you gone for man of the match?
We were told that we didn't exactly have to go for a player as well.
Okay, yeah.
Weren't we?
Okay.
So look, I'm just going to go for Jim Gavin. I thought he made...
Almighty.
But it was down to his tactical changes.
Have you got a Jim Gavin tattoo yet?
Yeah. Oh, well done, Jim. Well done, Jim. You've got the most talented group of players of their generation. And yet still you conceded 3 goals in the first 20 minutes.
Okay, let me put it this way, right? I've already mentioned that early substitution. If you also watch, he brought on Dennis Bastick at half-time and put him in midfield, and it was the first time we'd seen Keane O'Sullivan almost played as a sweeper. If you watch that second half again, the amount of times Kerry get forward, and every time they do, there's about 5 or 6 Dublin players in the square. Keane O'Sullivan, the general, as I mentioned earlier on, of that defence. And I thought, for his tactical changes, Dublin wouldn't have won that game if Jim Gavin wasn't in charge. There's no chance. And I would say as well, if you look on the other side, Eamon Fitzmaurice, his midfielders were being absolutely outplayed, I thought, throughout most of that game. And he had David Moran sitting on the bench, and he didn't bring him on till late in the game. I thought that was bad management. If he had brought Moran on, there was a lot of times where I know Keeley had a terrible day in goal actually for Kerry that day, but there was a lot of his kick-outs. Dublin were getting in above Kerry midfielders. You know, Keane O'Sullivan, Keane O'Sullivan isn't exactly the most dominant player in the air, but he was getting a lot of ground over gaining a lot of ground over the Kerry players in that game. I just thought, when you look at Jim Gavin on one side, making all the right decisions at the right times, whereas Eamon Fitzmaurice, you could see problems, starting to develop in that second half, and he didn't make the changes when required.
Bringing McManaman on for Bernard Brogan was another hugely brave decision from Jim Gavin that day. The actual man of the match, the Sunday game man of the match, was Diarmuid Connolly. It's an interesting one. We stumbled upon this bit of footage from the Sunday game that night, which is kind of a strange clashing of different times in the GAA. So this is Claire McNamara talking to Diarmuid Connolly after the game.
I think it's more the youth that came into the side. Obviously, we were very successful under 21 the last couple of years, so I think lads fighting for places again, that's really what drove us on,
Well, Diarmuid, congratulations. You are the RTE Super Value Man of the Match, and Peter Keane is here to present the award.
Peter Keane, of all people there.
That's fantastic.
I would have actually got that photograph tattooed on me had Kerry actually won the All-Ireland last year, but it wasn't to be that's...
To be fair, though, as well, and when I was I knew we were going to pick him out of the match, and I was watching, kind of see which... I thought Jack McCaffrey was brilliant at times in that game. He really opened up the Kerry defence. The Cooper obviously was just superb in that first half. But I think if you're looking for a consistent performer over the 70 minutes, Connolly really was. He was the right selection.
We're going to talk about the trends that were evident in this game. Just by watching this game in isolation alone, you knew that something was starting to creep into the GAA and had already festered big time, and that is cynicism in Gaelic games. We had the incident earlier in the year between Tyrone and Monaghan where Joe Brawley goes on a massive rant about Sean Kavanagh. Here's what Joe Brawley had to say in the aftermath of Kerry Dublin in 2013.
The game in the end is about glory. That's a glorious victory, a victory with honour by the Dubs, playing the game the right way, living and dying by their man-to-man strategy, playing a beautiful brand of football and playing with tremendous enthusiasm. And, the message should go out from here. The way the Dubs are playing Gaelic football, that's the way everybody should be coaching it. It's the way everybody should want to play it. Well, I was disappointed, I have to say, in the second half with the repeated cynical fouling by Kerry players. Repeated cynical fouling. I appreciate...
I didn't see too much of it, to be honest.
Well, that's not correct. That's not correct.
You're being negative, Joe.
And the point about it is that, we've seen it again today. The sooner the new rule comes out, and the better that men are being sent off. But you'd have to say, the courage of Jim Gavin to stick with his convictions at half-time, the way they played in the second half, it truly was hair-raising. We were standing up and sitting down and standing up. It was a fabulous occasion and a fabulous game of football.
Pass went down with glory.
It is. Joe is nitpicking now and being negative, picking out cynical players. Look, let's not be nitpicking. Look, the bottom line, Michael, we saw everything that was great about Gaelic football. Today was an advertisement for the game of Gaelic football, how it should be played. Two teams who set up their stall positively. Joe has been expounding these defensive systems for years that has ruined the game of Gaelic football. Now there is hope, now there is redemption.
Yeah, like there's elements of truth in everything they're saying there. Kerry were cynical, Dublin were cynical, because being cynical was something that you could be at the time, and pulling down players in certain areas was something you had to do. Like Jack Shore comes onto the pitch and the first thing he does is pull down one of his opposition players. So I'm not for 1 second saying that it was one county or the other. It was just on show, and one of the things that I picked as the thing that was trending at this point. I'm not sure what you've got. I'm sure you both spotted that as well. There's no haircuts,
the jerseys weren't quite as tight.
No.
Like, it's only
Philly McMahon
it's only 6 years ago, but how young a lot of these Dublin players look. Like Philly looks like a different person.
Totally different person.
Michael Darragh McCauley's short hair, I was like, he looks so different. You know, you see him now, he's like a Hollywood movie star, isn't he?
Jack McCaffrey looks like he's about 12.
Yeah.
He still does.
Like a trend of the time, was it a trend? I'm not sure if it was a trend or one of the more jarring facts that Keane O'Sullivan was like inside the opposition half.
Well, this is something that Steve was picked up on as well.
Regular basis.
Yeah.
He's just marauding forward. I'm like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Tomas just sit there in the pocket.
I thought Tomas O'Shea looked like the quintessential 1990s Premier League footballer. He had the shirt tucked in. You know, he was actually looking a bit like Roy Keane. It was like, if you see Roy Keane and he had the shorts up really high, I was like, get this old man off the field, he's past it.
Well, there was one moment when he tried chasing Diarmuid Connolly, and then he was down on his...
Well, what were they doing? They had Mark O'Shea and Tomas O'Shea on one side, like, it was 33 and 35, weren't they, at the time? There was three debutants, three players who had only made their championship debut. That, like, it really was. They were up against.
That's actually one thing that Next Day commented on in commentary, was that everybody's marking each other by the programme. Like, nobody had actually thought of. I know it's 2013, so like
move.
Yeah, like it's recent. People had done that, but they just decided to play by that. You mentioned most jarring. The most jarring moment for me in the game was Ciarán Kilkenny getting the ball by the sideline, and what Ciarán Kilkenny does now is hand pass the ball back, loop around, get the ball, hand pass the ball back again. But he had a pot shot from the sideline. He gets taken off later in the game. Maybe Mr. Gavin was unhappy with his star pupil, but I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Dennis Bastick is another man who has a pot shot from about 50 yards out. Another thing is Stephen Cluxton on freeze. It just feels weird at this point. We can watch the 2011 thing and see that in kind of as a really nostalgic moment, but then when you're actually in the cut and thrust of a regular match watching event, seeing Cluxton coming back up the pitch now is strange. Not seeing Dean Rock just wander over to it. And then the other thing then, which you kind of already alluded to, is Kerry's fitness. Seeing players gassed on the pitch is something that we just don't see in Kerry Dublin games. We don't see it in any inter-county games at the moment, and there was a gulf in the fitness between Kerry and Dublin in 2013, which just shows the level of conditioning that Donegal were at in 2014 to be fitter than them, in 2012 to be fitter than them. Obviously Donegal beat that Kerry team in 2012 as well. That fitness was a big difference. I think it was jarring to see that Kerry were actually a few years behind these counties, and that perhaps the Eamon Fitzmaurice appointment perhaps came a bit too late for the county.
Yeah, for some of the most jarring, like one of them I thought was actually Jim Gavin on the touchline and looks to his left and where's J.O.?
Yeah.
Where's J.O.?
Where was J.O.? Just hadn't been called in at that point.
Called on board then.
It was the year after, wasn't it?
After was in there with Declan Darcy.
Exactly, which is most unusual. Like Jim Gavin obviously looking a little bit younger and less stressed as well. Well, it's funny because obviously people within GAA would have, particularly in Dublin, would have known Jim Gavin as a player and as the under-21 coach, but the wider world is getting to know him and what sort of personality he is, and when it's absolute chaos in those final couple of minutes, like Kevin McStay in commentary is going, it goes to Jim Gavin, he's like, he's the calmest man in Croke Park, is what Darren Maloney says, and Kevin McStay is like, there's something not working there. Like, well, actually, unfortunately for everyone, it's all working very well right now.
That was the other thing, actually. Do you think McManaman meant that goal?
Well,
McStay he went for a point.
I'm a great believer in incredibly talented sports people being able to do remarkable things. So, when Ronaldinho would score these wonder goals from 40. Did he really make them? I'm like, yes, he did. Like, he can do that stuff all the time. I was very tempted at about 11:30 last night rewatching it to text Kevin McManaman and just see what I'm sure he says and will always claim, of course I meant it. Like, it was a horrible, horrible miss kick if The way he shapes his foot suggests to me
he tries to guide it into that top corner.
he's trying to put it into the top corner.
Yeah.
I'm not having it.
What?
I think you can make the Ronaldinho comparison grand, but you can't take points in football. Like, you can't take points in soccer. It's like if Ronaldinho lobbed a few into the top corner, then you might say, well, did he mean it or not? Because you can actually put the ball over the bar and score. That's what can happen in Gaelic football. At that moment in time, a point would have been okay for Dublin. And I just think in that scenario, it was madness to go for a goal, and it was an incredible goal.
But sorry, Dublin, he's approaching Hill 16 trying to get his team into an All-Ireland final, and he has a chance to score a goal into the Hill. Bloody damn right he meant it. And if you just, as you say, Nathan, the way he shaped his foot, and he definitely tries to guide that into the top corner.
Ken McStay told it was a miss kick. It's a definite miss kick. A definite miss kick.
He also said the same about Connolly took the punt in for Mannion's goal.
Yeah.
And he said that Connolly was trying to go for a point. I genuinely think Connolly was trying to find Mannion with that ball.
Because he was miles off.
McStay was I don't think he realised how talented all these Dublin footballers were.
Well, I think maybe it was that realisation of, Jesus, these guys can do pretty wondrous things.
Yeah, we definitely didn't give Dublin enough credit for being good at football. We were like, oh, it's great that they've got like big AIG money and they can put all the strength and conditioning and they have their meals prepped. That broccoli at lunchtime can't kick the ball over the bar for you.
One of the things you notice as well, and obviously everyone knows that this is right up there as one of the greatest games of all time, and like people still talk about it like that, even though we've had like the last 6 or 7 years feels like we've had an awful lot of at the latter stage of championship brilliant games. But then you look at the 2-15s, you're like, how could it not have been? There can't have been a game where there's been 30 more talented players on the pitch.
Yeah.
Like, it was insane. Dublin they didn't all perform on the day, but that Dublin half-forward line is the greatest half-forward line that will ever go on the pitch together.
Yeah, possibly,
Kieran Kilkenny and Jeremy Connolly.
Strangely enough,
the two forward lines.
Kilkenny and Flynn were great that day, were they?
Flynn was anonymous for good, but obviously pops up right at the end, sort of drops back into more of a sweeper role and does, but as individual players over the course of their career, and then Kerry still have all that great team. With Gavin still there, the O'Shea's still there. O'Donoghue's just emerging. Like Gooch is pulling the strings in the first half. Yeah, like the talent that was on that pitch.
And the thing about Cooper as well, and although people have spoken about the performance so much, the thing that kind of stood out to me as well was that he did all those great things in such tight, confined spaces with so many bodies in front of him. He was able to pick out the right man. And it's like that thing what they say about great sports people is that they can paint pictures in their mind of what's going on the pitch. And I thought that game really demonstrated that Cooper had that ability to do that. Like, it was just...
And it was the last great moment for Colin Cooper in a Kerry shirt anyway, because obviously he does his cruciate the next year, doesn't come back the same player. He puts in a couple of good performances, but that was by far his last peak.
Were there still questions about him as a centre-forward before that game? Or was that sort of...
I guess there was questions about everybody in that Kerry team before that game, and their performances hadn't been brilliant during the year at all. But I think Gooch and I think it was in the last day of the league up in Omagh when he's actually fielded at 11 and he's sublime. He's just spraying balls left, right and centre. And I think teams then realised that actually whoever's on him just needs to run the other way. And we saw that 2 years later in the final when they met again.
Again, a lot of these are young guys and Jim Gavin's developing as well, and maybe he wasn't fully aware of the influence he could have on them, because Kieran Kilkenny at that stage, you're looking at him thinking he could be the next Gooch, like that he has the talent to be that artist, that creative force, whereas actually by whether it was game plan or him being mini Jim and Jim very much thinking like he's just somebody who's there and just keeps everything ticking over now, like he's the simplest footballer around.
But the reason why that happened was Donegal. Like exactly. If that hadn't happened, I would have been very interested, and that brings us beautifully onto the reaction. And I don't recall anything important being said in the aftermath of the game at the time. I don't remember any kind of standout quotes, but I was just listening back to Eamon Fitzmaurice this morning, and this is a very interesting line from Fitzmaurice in the immediate aftermath of the defeat.
The game panned out the way we expected it to pan out. We expected we would get goal chances. The way Dublin played, they do leave themselves open at the back. We felt that we had the forwards to punish that, and that's the way it played out in the first half. But look, they're a serious team. We knew that they were favourites for a reason today, and that same man again broke our hearts 2 years ago. Got the goal again today, and he just it was the difference between the sides.
It's incredible to think that the greatest team of all time will always give you goal chances. Jim McGuinness perhaps was listening to that, then a year later they bang in 3 goals and they knocked Dublin out.
Fitzmaurice was writing about this last year, actually, in the Examiner, going through Kerry Dublin games that he was involved in, and said something similar, that Dublin defenders back then weren't as good one-on-one, that they were still very gung-ho, that there was we're Dublin, we go out, we play our brand of football and we will just kill you, which actually gave teams of the talent of probably Donegal, Kerry, Mayo a big opportunity.
Yeah. We're going to get into sliding doors moments now, and I actually just think that this just this win for Dublin was a sliding doors moment, because I reckon Dublin would have won the 5 in a row in 2018 rather than 19 had Kerry won 2013, because this would have been the moment when Jim Gavin was like, right, okay, this is great fun and all, but it's not going to win us every single All-Ireland, or we're not going to be that infallible. And he would have that winter then started working on that defensive system. Well, not the defensive, the system, the pitch-wide system that allows him to be such an unstoppable machine when they're on song. That would have been Cian O'Sullivan perfecting the 6 role. It would have been Dean Rock perfecting his frees. I know that was going to happen anyway, like you had to have a free taker, but I just feel that Kerry wouldn't have won the All-Ireland in 2014 because Dublin wouldn't have got beaten by Donegal in 2014. Oof. And then they would have gone on this incredible run that is still alive.
So the sliding doors moment, obviously, of this decade and the generation in Gaelic football is the Donegal game in 2014 between Dublin and Donegal. But a defeat to Kerry is very different, I think, for every county than a defeat to Donegal, because Kerry aristocrats, there's an acceptance almost that... You look at that 15 that was out there, okay, Gooch has an out-of-this-world game. You move on, you try and go back and you try and be a little bit better, and you're assuming Kerry are probably on a little dip. Whereas the reason he flipped after 2014 was because Dublin couldn't figure out a way against a blanket defence.
Yeah.
And that there was obviously a fear for Jim Gavin that actually probably didn't really pan out in one way, that every team is now going to copy Dublin.
Yeah, it was as much to do with their attacking.
And be a blanket defence, and we need to find another way of playing. Whereas this was just, I should say, pretty much 15 on 15. That if they'd lost this, they would have just put it down to we're losing to a better team. But what would it have done to the confidence of a Kieran Kilkenny, Paul Mannion, Jack McCaffrey if they lose this year and then they don't win in 2014? Like suddenly they don't have that All-Ireland in the back pocket. For me, the sliding doors moment is that if Kerry win this game, Mayo win the All-Ireland final. And Mayo are the dominant team of the decade. That Mayo 2013 team is Mayo. I'm not joking here.
Okay.
Mayo 2013. Now, granted, there may be some history that when it came to playing Kerry in an All-Ireland final, Mayo may have some issues. But, like, Kieran Donaghy will probably go and, he'll have another hat-trick in an All-Ireland final if it had turned out that way. But Mayo 2013 was the best incarnation of Mayo
without question
of that decade.
Yeah.
Like what the performance of the Horan era was, the quarter-final against Donegal. Like Cillian O'Connor, who's had so many injury problems and was very much going to be the star performer. Like Lee Keegan's obviously the one now everyone looks at, but Cillian O'Connor at the start of the decade was the one who would transform Mayo because forward play was always the problem. He scores a hat-trick against Donegal, is like on course to be player of the year. And I think if it's Kerry, that Mayo beat Kerry in the final, they get one, and they probably win 3 over the course of the decade.
After an All-Ireland win, perhaps that game in Limerick does fall their way, or they don't need the game in Limerick, that know-how of an All-Ireland win, perhaps, is that the thin margin that they were missing in 2014. It's an interesting theory. I definitely agree that Mayo were arguably, well, that was definitely the best version of Mayo that we saw, about going on to be the dominant team of the decade. I'm not sure if anybody could have stopped Dublin doing it.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I definitely think if Mayo had been playing Kerry in that final, Mayo would have won. Like you look at that back 6 that Kerry played against Dublin, I think Mayo would have been dominant against them. And again, I think that Mayo team of that year would have been pretty much close, or on a par fitness-wise to that Dublin team. And I think over 70 minutes, Mayo definitely would have the better of them. Regards to whether they've won 2 or 3 after that, I don't know.
They would have still been celebrating today in the year 2020 if they'd won the All-Ireland in 2013.
No, they would have won 13, 14 and then probably won, nicked the other one at 17.
Well, Dublin couldn't follow up theirs in 2011, and I think Mayo might have had a similar problem winning that. And it would have meant a lot more to Mayo winning that All-Ireland that year. Like trying to follow up the next year afterwards, I think would have been a real struggle for them.
Just before we wrap, we had Kieran Donaghy on OTB AM, and he was talking about his sliding door moment from this game in which he came on as a substitute.
I was like for a lot of it, watching it. And
you weren't sure?
No, just watching it in the stands. It was so good. Like you turned into a fan. You know, you really felt like we had the upper hand at stages, and then Dublin had just quickly snatched that out of your thought process. But yeah, look, a remarkable game that came down to literally inches at the end. That last kick out when the game was on the line, even Declan had a shot. I think that I slipped him and he hit the post with it later on.
That was the moment.
It's Macaulay's flick.
Yeah, that's after that. If Declan puts it over, we're a point up, and all of a sudden, you know, there's less pressure on maybe Mark to go for that ball, or maybe he holds back and reads the breakers. But it was a level game in the 17th minute, and felt like it was a ball to do or die for, and everybody went for it. And Macaulay got the basketball, long hand touch out in front to set up the winner.
How many people were marking you when you came on? It looked like there was 6 people around you at one stage.
Yeah, no, it was like, that's the awful situation for a guy like me or Tommy Walsh or any big midfielder that has been thrown into full forward at the end of the game, right? No matter whether it's intermediate or C team, junior C's that I played when I was younger, or at the very highest level, it's a rotten place to be, and you get it 1 out of 20. You get a ball, or you flick one to the net, or you catch it and you set someone up for a goal. But the rest of the time, it's been pulled and dragged, and backs break it down, and they have so many bodies back in a panic that they get the breaker, and away they go up the field, and there's nothing more demoralising to watch them fighting for your life for a ball, and it gets broken, and you just see them sweeping and breaking up the pitch, and you know, okay, in the modern day, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 minutes before it goes again, and if you look up and there's only a minute to go, you probably know that's it. So it's a tough place to be.
Michael Dara Macaulay is a pretty good shout for one of the sliding door moments of that game. Just before we wrap up, we're going to decide if this was an underrated or an overrated match. I think it's pretty clear that it was underrated, especially given the credence about the context of the game and what the impact of this result was in football for the years after, and given the actual quality that we had for 70 minutes, I think it's actually underrated. When you watch back and consider what we now know, I think so. And like, it's just the kind of the passing of legends in the night here, where you've got like Tomás O'Shea standing in front of Stephen Cluxton, not allowing him to take a free. That sort of shithousery from Tomás O'Shea in his last game. That just signifies as you did miss that.
I was being a bit. I was just being, I suppose, a little bit facetious earlier on mentioning O'Shea. I thought Tomás, like he really had a big influence on that game, you know. And for a man, you know, coming into his final year there, I thought his performance was excellent. Regards to the game, I thought it was funny.
Cluxton didn't have a great game.
He didn't. No.
There was a moment. 70 minutes. So they've just got the goal through McManaman. Are they 3 points? Comes up, and there's like 5 Kerry players around him. You're going, oh my God, like this is the most stupid thing any goalkeeper's ever done. And he just about gets away with it.
Yeah, I think though as well, you know, and a lot of the comments I think the pundits made at half-time and full-time were a little bit, you know, off the mark. And I think that just demonstrates how in the heat of the moment of a game you can you're so carried away with it that you can kind of say, you know, things are maybe not totally accurate. But I think watching it last night in the early hours of the morning, and just seeing the cold light of day, and you know, knowing what the result is and all that kind of thing, I definitely appreciated many more facets of that match last night. And I'd probably go with you on. I think it was definitely underrated slightly.
Yeah, underrated, but still, we're talking about it being underrated when people talk about it being
possibly the best game ever.
The best game ever. Like, it is. You watch it back because the quality of the goals from both sides, from obviously you touched on what Gooch was doing in the first half to Kevin McManaman meaning that, and also what we know now in fact probably makes it greater when we do look at the 2 generations, that we know what Jack McCaffrey and Mannion and all these guys go on to achieve, that you're not just looking at them as another player. It's this is where it all started.
Yeah.
Like, this is where they're coming in, making an impression, going up against Donegal Walsh and Tomás O'Shea and all these real battle-hardened Kerry players, and they didn't give a shit. They just did whatever the hell they wanted. And Cooper and like, which is the part that maybe Dublin fans don't like talking about as much, like the Cooper Philly axis of evil, of just
it needed to be.
Like, it needed to be, absolutely, because Jesus, like that Kerry team were a badass team. Like, they knew how to rough it up. And actually having Philly and Cooper going, bring it on.
Yeah, there was a lack of Paul Galvin shithousery, I felt, in 2013. Maybe that was...
Actually, it was. He kicked a couple of good scores, but it was
football in Galvin we saw rather than around the fringes.
He looked a bit deflated or something. There was just, you're like, where is he? Come on!
Yeah. He saw Philly coming on with his jersey tucked into his shorts with that fresh new haircut, and he thought to himself, I ain't out-harding this guy.
Was that the game that made Michael Dara Macaulay?
Yeah.
Like, it was. There was never a game. There was never a game more suited to Macaulay because control isn't his thing. Like, just shocking, madness. Him in the middle of it.
He should have scored a goal within the first couple of seconds of the game as well. So.
Well, we can get into has there ever been a footballer of more talent who can't kick the ball? Like some of them, Jesus Christ, like.
By the way, it wasn't actually. One quick clarification. I mentioned AIG earlier on. It was, of course, Vodafone money pumping Dublin to their All-Ireland wins at the time.
Vodafone would have been in touch. Why are AIG getting all the credit?
There wasn't a penalty either. Just want to make that clear here.
It finished Dublin 3-18, Kerry 3-11. It is an absolute classic. It was the 2013 All-Ireland football semi-final. Nathan Murphy, Stephen Doyle, thanks a million for popping in. If you've got any suggestions for classic games for the OTB Classic Games Club, you can tweet us at Off The Ball and we'll do it whenever we get around to it. Chat to you later. Bye-bye.